Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Evil. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, we're continuing the conversation about RSM, fertility, and obviously Ben and David are asking questions to Kristen, and you know, for her it's like, oh, everything was above board, and then Ben starts asking the questions, and the conversation gets a little awkward, because it's like, oh, what are you trying to say, that my daughter's demonic? It's like, no, I'm just asking, oh, are you asking if she displayed anything that would be psychopathic? He was like, no, I'm just asking if everything was weird. She's like, no, and he's like, okay. And it's like, great. It's like, yeah, just things get awkward for a bit because she got defensive. I mean, it's interesting because, like, Kristen will try to be somewhat objective in certain regards, but the fact is, when it comes to her own daughter, she's not being objective at all. Like, understandably, like, you're not going to have objectivity when it comes to your own. You can have separation when it's something else, but of course, when it comes to your own child, like, of course, your own biases are going to, like, interfere. And I don't think Kristen realizes that. Because, you know, in her mind, it's like, yeah, my daughter's fine. Like, there is nothing weird, there's nothing off. It's like, you know, to a certain extent, like, she's right. At least like, nothing Alexis-wise is ever going to the extent with, like, Eric or the girl from earlier this season that supposedly, like, burned, like, set fires and stuff like that. So other than that, they started interviewing the other parents. And, it was weird going to Eric's mom again. I was like, yeah. It's like, they're like, yeah, our lawyer says, like, our legal fees will go away. And then Kristen and David look at each other like, it's just like, I'm so happy for you. It's like, yeah. It's like, it's got to be awkward being around her because it's like, despite everything, you know she and her husband killed Eric. It's like, you know. So it is a little awkward. They didn't talk about it with him, but the other kid, it's like, oh yeah, like, the mother was like, oh yeah, like, the only other weird thing was, like, well, first and foremost, she's like, yeah, I got a notice about termination of payment and stuff like that, and I'm like, and Kristen's like, nope, I never got anything like that, but also she brings up her child had, like, has, like, a, like, extra, like, that canine thing that Alexis has going on. We never found out whether or not Eric had that or not. Maybe that's supposed to be, like, a defining feature in that. Who knows? But Kristen looks into it and finds out, like, wait, what? Oh, yeah, I didn't know there was still, I needed to make any payments on it. I haven't been making any payments. It's like, oh yeah, like, your 12 eggs? Yeah, someone else has. Okay, who? Can't tell you that information. I'm like, wait, how is that information private? Because she kept stressing that, because that is kind of jacked up. It's like, oh, no, this information that's a part of your information is private. It's like, shouldn't I know who's paying for my own eggs? Like, that's a little weird. And obviously, Kristen goes to the office directly, and I love that the lady at the reception, she was like, she's my manager, she's going to be worse. This place is awful. And it's like, wait, what? It's like, all right, it was a Dr. Archery who used to work here, like, but she left here like 5 years ago, but she's the one that's been paying for your eggs. And it's like, and she's just like, it's the end of days. And it's like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, it's the end of days, and we should be kind to each other. I'm like, that was a little weird, but I guess it's like, maybe she's like a very religious person, and she just feels like there's a lot of evil in this place, which I'm like, I guess that's what that's supposed to mean. I was like, that kind of came out of nowhere, and Kristen's almost like, sure. So, I love that Kristen confronts Dr. Archery, and it's like, interesting timing too, I guess, because, like, I'm wondering, like, some big site spoilers, I'm curious, because that's, she was in, like, was it season 1 of Manifest, or was it season 2 as well? I can't remember. But I'm like, I wonder if she's going to come back to Manifest, like, with current circumstances as they are. Certain things have been presented, and I'm like, oh, it seems like that could potentially turn into her returning to manifesting. Regardless, going on a tangent and all that. It's not the same. I don't think I was about to say is like, that's not the same actress who played Chemical Mary in The Blacklist, is it? I'm trying to remember. That might be. I don't know. I had to look into that to kind of, like, correct that in my head or not. But regardless, tangents and all that aside, she was just kind of like, yeah, like, because Kristen's like, yeah, you've been paying for my eggs. And she's like, well, they were abandoned. She's like, no, I didn't abandon them. You guys just never told me about keeping payments up about it. You know, that's why I've never, because I guess in her mind, it's like, right, I guess it was just like, I guess she thought, like, oh, maybe, like, those eggs are no good, or maybe, like, I have no more eggs stored away or something like that. I guess just for her, it's like, it slipped my mind, because no one ever followed up on it, and that's the whole point. It's like, no, we're gonna like, oh, people who are forgetful, and on top of that, we'll just like slide these over here. So it's like, how many other people have they done that to, or is Kristen a special case? Like, it makes you wonder, like, have they always had an eye for Kristen? But to be fair, because it makes you almost like wonder, like, I'm throwing it out there now because it was only like, well, because she said like she gave them away like 11 years ago, so part of me is wondering, like, do you think that some of these other, like, the cases we're dealing with over the course of the series, are we going to find out, like Eric, for example, like, could they be from Kristen's eggs? Is that what we're going to find out? Like, that feels like that's what that might be setting up, but it might just be like no, they've done this to other women as well, but it just seems like Kristen's at the centerfold of all of this, and in a certain degree and aspect. Like I said, it just could be like, oh, like, this show's painting it that way because it's like, she's our viewpoint into the RSM situation, but like I said, maybe it's just like they've done what they've done to Kristen to other mothers. Maybe later episodes will kind of get into that, but like so far it's just focusing on the fact that she's the one that's got 12 missing eggs, 11 apparently later on, because like, wait, what happened to the 12th one? So it's like, that's the thing too. I'm wondering, like, did she actually have more, and they've actually been like slowly like knocking those off the list and stuff. Regardless, Dr. Autry went full blown like, I can't believe you'd come here and threaten me. I told him, you're going to sue me for malpractice because, like, she was going off and lying like a mother sucker, dude. I'm like, holy, I should have said motherfucker. I don't know why. I don't know why I censored myself. Who cares, right? I just thought that was wild, and I just like, I love Kristen's on the like, say goodbye to your business, bitch. It's just like, dude. Because Dr. Autry was going off on her like that, saying like, oh, come in here. She physically threatened me. I'm like, wow, you're a piece of crap. But then it turns out the moment she left, where did she go? Leland's apartment. Sadly, we find out later on, like, she was like, it's like they kind of removed her from the board. Like, I guess, like, either she was too much of a liability because we can't leave you out and about since Kristen and them have already started questioning you. It's like, no. Like, they're taking a focus to this, so we can't have you on the board. So either they just removed her for now, because it seemed like they paralyzed her as well, whether they were going to kill her later on or what. We have no idea what Dr. Autry's fate is. I kind of feel like you got killed just because you're too much of a liability. We'll see. So that was interesting. But like I said, Kristen was able to get back her 11 of her eggs. But there's a question like, where did the 12th one go? It's like, no, it's always been 12. I love it. They love it in a twisted way of like, man, they are gaslighting her like crazy. Like, no, it's always been 11. It's like, no, you told me 12. There's documents saying 12. It's like, oh, that's a mistake. It's always been 11. And that reset, because notice that she's the one behind the desk too, and not the other lady. It's like, oh, she either quit or she got fired because they probably found out about the information. The moment Dr. Autry got found out, they were probably like, oh, someone's leaking some information. So I think that's supposed to be pertinent information in that regard. That she was out front and not like in her, like that, not playing the managerial role. She was there as a reception. So I'm like, and just that look on her face, like, that whole like smile, and just like there's evil behind that smile. So that's interesting. Like I said, I'm curious to find out if that's what they're suggesting, that Kristen is the one, like, all these bad seeds to a certain extent are coming from her. Like I said, are they just coming from other people? I mean, the eggs themselves, not necessarily, like, you know, the seed themselves, but, like, that's why I'm curious. Part of me is wondering, I'm jumping around a little bit, I'm wondering, is, like, Edward going to end up being, like, the common denominator amongst these children, like, the father in this case, like, I'm probably thinking too much about it. That's why I'm like, for them all, like, I mean, because it feels like you had to have some kind of source for some demonic stuff. So, like, he doesn't even have to be, like, the actual, like, father to the seed. What I mean is, like, maybe that demonic seed of, like, they implant some of who he is. He calls himself an influencer, so that could be like him just being like on the nose about it. It could be like, because that's what I was kind of getting, kind of like a demonic influence. Or maybe he's like legitimately, they're taking like stuff from him and implanting it in these said eggs, and maybe they can implant it in people to make it easier to influence them to do bad and be bad, to influence them towards evil. I don't know. that's just kind of what's crossing my mind in that regard. Kind of tied to all that is Alexis this episode. She's watching Melinda's videos, and it's like, wow, you're back. Once again, I love they do that stuff of like, right, it's just like something that's kind of like, that was just a last season thing, and now they kind of sprinkled it in here in the background, serving kind of its own purpose, because Alexis is very, she's having, like, she has body issues in her mind, and like, you could tell like she's thinking like she's fat or something when she's not. Which I thought that was kind of interesting. And then we also have the thing with her with a tail. So I'm like, it's interesting because it's like, either it's supposed to represent like, oh, she's hiding it, or maybe it's just kind of like, I don't know. Because in a sense, like, when you cut back from the mirror and just see her like non-reflection self, she doesn't have it. So like, maybe it exists on some plane of existence people can't normally see. Either that's what that's supposed to represent, or is it supposed to be, is it, someone had said it recently, like, what they love most about the show is you never know like what's real and what's just kind of like something else. Like, it feels like this demonic crazy stuff is real, but the way the show paints it makes you go, is it though? You know? Because, like, that's why I'm like, is that supposed to be, like, a literal manifestation of a tail because, like, it's actually there, you just can't see it? Or is it just supposed to be a representation of the fact is of, like, oh, like, this is the something else that you are, like, that there's something within you that's not quite of this world. I don't know what to make of that. It's interesting, too, because, like, Cheryl ended up saying that Kristen had very similar issues, which I think that's interesting, like how they take real world stuff and then they do put their like evil spin to it, as in like Evil the show like puts its own like spin to like, yeah, this is like, yeah, like an influencer telling you to look a certain way even though they don't look a certain way. It's like, oh, they use every social media trick to make themselves look perfect and stuff like that, because like Alexa's like, yeah, I want my skin to be smooth. It's like, your skin is already smooth. It's like, no, but it can be smoother. And then like the whole like saran wrap around your legs, like, and it's just like, Jesus, that's, dude, I can never be in a situation like I can never, like, I can be an outside viewer, but I can never understand what it's like to be a girl growing up in the age of social media, where it's just kind of like, once again, it's a commentary on that of just kind of like, yeah, like influencers saying like, oh, you could look like this and blah, 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 even though they might not look like this on a regular basis, that they use every trick in the book to make themselves like smooth everything out. Because like later on, Kristen shows Alexis Melendez really, which is also interesting because I'm surprised you're able to kind of upload. I mean, she made that fake apology, which that was all commentary in itself last season, but also it's just kind of like there were pictures of her because it was like the whole fraud thing and stuff like that. So I wonder, are those videos like older videos that are still up? They're circulating because the purpose is for them to circulate, but Melendez herself is just kind of like in trouble and stuff like that. So I don't know, because I didn't pay as much attention as I should have, like, but it seemed like there was some stuff talking about like FBI investigating her fraud and stuff like that. So those might be like older videos that are just still in circulation. But you had Kristen saying like, right, your flaws make you unique and stuff like that. So like, don't look at them as such a detriment. They kind of make you stand out, So making her more body positive, which is interesting because she's getting that message. And like I said, it is about body positivity, while also like, oh man, this lizard tail that she has going on, as being more positive about that and embracing it. Because before she was knocking away, but now she's embracing like, my lizard tail. I'm like, this show, man, this show. So other than all of that, there's also the Cheryl situation, like her with Leland. He's inviting her to a party. Once again, it's like Cheryl's still been on that path. Like, I'm wondering, does this mean, is it because she's turned away from like her doll a little bit? Like, whatever that was, like the positivity that it was kind of putting in her life, like she's letting Leland kind of, once again, that whole thing seemed creepy, but it seemed like Cheryl was kind of doing potentially better. But then it's like Leland's back in her life, and all of a sudden that influence starts kicking in again because she ended up like stealing that dress. Who knows? That seed of corruption that's inside of her that Leland kind of planted last season. It's just kind of like a oh, it's not like I'm just tapping into what's already there. I'm letting you run wild without having too much of a conscience about it. So that maybe that's what the argument could be like, oh, like, is evil already inside you? It just needs someone to sprout the seed like Leland did for her? Or is it just supposed to be a thing of, no, like, he planted the actual like evil seed in you and now it's starting to grow, like nature versus nurture conversation to a certain extent. So I'm still unclear because someone had hit me up before being like, oh, she was already, because someone had took her situation as possession, and I told them like, oh, I never took her situation as being considered possession. I always took it as like, oh, just pure corruption, like her soul being corrupted, not necessarily her being possessed. I never took her storyline as her being possessed, but and I thought that was fascinating because it's like, oh, like, I mean, I think a lot of this is up, like, none of it's like fully like clarified. I think a lot of it is up to your own interpretation. Like, it's meant to be vague enough for you to kind of include your own perspective on certain things, I think. But yeah, she once again, like that red, Kristen's supposed to be staying, like the whole point last season, was like, oh, stay away from it. But I'm curious, like, or at least Grace told her last season, but I'm curious, like, does that still apply? Because they still keep throwing that color red, especially with Cheryl. But she shows up at this party, it's a white party, and like, but she's the only one wearing red. Then she meets Edward, who's like, oh, I'm an influencer, and yada yada yada. Like, the whole dynamic she kind of has with Leland is kind of reflected with Edward too. I'm like, what's this all about? She even said like, are you trying to pimp me out, Leland? And he's like, which answer do you prefer? And I'm like, dude, this is weird. I'm like, I don't know. I was like, is Edward higher management, like one of the higher managing people that the goat dude who, once again, I brought up last episode, I thought he was supposed to be the devil. It's like, no, I guess he's just kind of like another fellow demon that Leland killed last episode. It's just kind of like, I guess, Edward's higher management that, Leland was like, oh, I'll just talk to him myself if they have any issues. So I'm like, I guess that's what he's doing this episode. But the moment, like, he starts drinking and hanging out with Cheryl, and she's like, oh, so what was that guy? Oh, the small man's issue? It's like, yeah, he was trying to murder someone, and I was suggesting not. It's like, he's like, oh, yeah, I don't condone murder. When I'm like, well, Leland, like, I don't know if that was supposed to be in a weird way, an inside joke, because, I mean, when Leland potentially murdered one of your colleagues last episode, so that's why I'm like, is that really the case? Or is he just being like, Leland can do whatever you want to? That's Leland. Me personally, I don't condone murder. Like, I don't know if that's supposed to be that. Like, I think for him, it's like, there are other ways to handle this, a more sly and sophisticated. Like, I don't know if it's supposed to be like, oh, like, there's a better way of handling situations rather than having to go straight to murder. Like, why murder someone when that's another soul you can influence / corrupt? Or maybe something of that nature. But so we have that, and then Cheryl goes with him to Leland's place, and she's like, wait, is this supposed to be a sexual thing? He's like, no. And she's getting drunk, and it's like, oh, like, if I have one more drink, I'll fall asleep. I'm like, I don't think you want to fall asleep around these guys. And he's like, yeah, if you could actually stand up, if you try to stand up, could you? And then, like, Cheryl starts getting nervous because she can't move, and he's like, okay, no, don't worry, this isn't going to hurt. And then you're like, what are they going to... I knew, like, David was going to come over to talk to Leland, confront Leland about some of this stuff, because they couldn't find Dr. Autry because she was on her extended vacation and stuff like that. But I was like wondering, like, if David was going to get there in time. What they were necessarily doing, we don't know. Like, both Cheryl and him were hooked up to things, and they were getting pumped full of something. And obviously Cheryl was scared, but then the next time we see Cheryl, she seems fine. She's just kind of like, oh, hi, you're Kristen's priest friend, and then, like, yada yada yada, everything's fine. I'm like, what? Why are you okay with everything that just went down? You were terrified before, but now it's like, once again, I guess it's just kind of more of that, like, influence that, I was talking about before. So it's like, what's up with that? We get no answer. So I think we're going to see Cheryl kind of more corrupted, even more so than before, maybe. Like, oh, it's bad enough her hanging out with Layla. I think it's going to get worse with her hanging around Edward, but we'll see. The other fascinating aspect about this episode is Ben and Vanessa. Vanessa's like, oh my god, like, Maggie, she's destroying the place. Like, Ben, I need your help. This is out of control. And it's like, okay. Whatever this is, I'll help you. I'll be there every step of the way. She's like, I love you. He's like, I think I love you. She's like, you think? He's like, I have to think before I say something and believe it, So she was wanting to get professional help. That was kind of like a, a psychic / spiritualist, but he's like, no, I thought you meant something like legit, like therapy. He wants Kristen to talk to her. But they go through the whole thing. And I think, because at first Ben's kind of like, all right, yada, 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 because he doesn't believe in the whole thing, because he's like, okay, this is a scam. Like, you know, I mean, that's how him and Vanessa met, was through like a ghost hunting type of show. And he's always the one looking for like, all right, like, what's the scam here? Like, how's this all working? What's the mechanics behind it? Because at first he's looking at the table like, oh, how'd you pull this off? But then it's like, then everything else starts happening, and I think he starts kind of being like, okay, I don't see how you were able to do that. So this is real. And then like, it's like, oh, Sarah, Maggie, if you love your sister, let her be happy. Then Vanessa passes out, and I'm like, okay. But then it's like Vanessa's personality completely shifts, and so she's almost a completely different person. And it's just, and she's like, yeah, I'm free of my sister Maggie. And she wipes the wrong arm. He's like, I thought it was your other arm. She's like, what? It's like, yeah, you said like the whole Maggie thing was with your other arm. She's like, oh, it's crazy. And he's just like, kind of like, I'll give you 3 guesses. And he was just like, Vanessa. She's like, eh. And it was like, I guess that should have been a sign. But I love the whole thing of him being asleep, being like, Vanessa, Maggie. And she's like, what? He's like, did you call me Maggie? He's like, what? I must have been talking in my sleep. So that was weird. But he still wants her to talk to Kristen and stuff like that, which I even love her being like, oh, if you want to have try to make me jealous at first. And then she was like, yeah, if you want to have a threesome, all you have to do is ask me, Ben. But it's like, okay, what's up with this? Like, why is she? And then like he gets a call from Vanessa. It's like, oh, you missed me. And she's like, oh, you're calling me from the kitchen. And then it's like, who's that? And it's like, wait, who's this on the phone? Because like Vanessa's here. And it's like, that he's been sleeping with Maggie the entire time. I'm like, dude, Maggie is so twisted, because it seems like, so basically it brings this entire Vanessa thing into a different perspective, because that means anytime he met Vanessa out and about in the world, that was Vanessa. But when it was like, oh, like when he first met Vanessa at her place about the whole, like, and she brings up the whole arm thing, that was Matt. Like, either she was really being truthful about, like, that was Vanessa being like, hey, this is, like, I have this, like, because the moment she referenced the arm thing, like, she actually legitimately has a twin. It's not a dead twin. It's a, like, oh, it's like, that she absorbed. It's like, no, like, that was Maggie who's been messing with you. That means the entire time Maggie's been messing with you. And it's like, wait, what? Oh, once again, this show is so crazy, because you're thinking, because I was legitimately like, oh, is this supposed to mean like Vanessa's gone and now Maggie's taking over type of thing? Interesting timing though, because there was another show, slight spoilers, God, there's a show I've watched super recently that had a revelation similar to this, and I was like, oh, just interesting timing, like that these would pop up. I'll leave it at that, because I don't want to spoil this particular show, because I want a lot of people to watch this particular show, but also, it was just interesting timing. But I'm like, man, that's, once again, back to that person's comment, like, and that's what I said, like, what this show does best. It's just, you never know what's real. You never know, like, is this really something like this, supernatural? And it's like, is there something there legitimately about, like, oh, her twin? It's like, no, her legitimate twin is crazy and loves messing with her sister's life. So, like I said, every time Ben, like, that's why, like, she was like, oh, like, my twin must have given you the wrong number and stuff like that. So I'm like, that's why I'm like, that must not have been Vanessa at that time. That had to be Maggie at that time. Because when, like, the phone was... when the phone... Oh, God. Because... How does that work? It makes you wonder, did they always have that planned? Or is that something they were like, no, we could take it in this direction in season 2? Like, I don't know if that's what they were going with. Because obviously Ben had his reservations the moment it's like, oh, like the moment I brought up, like the whole time, the moment the Maggie thing was brought up, I don't know. My mind is like all over the place with this. I'm just kind of like, so who... Like, is my mind straight on, like, anytime they met out publicly, it was always Vanessa, but it seems like some of the times, even when they met, like, out and about, it seems like it could have been Maggie as well. So I'm like, it makes you go back, and you have to go back and rewatch every episode with Vanessa and be like, was that Vanessa or was that Maggie? Like, the fact that she's been pretending to be her sister the entire time is kind of crazy. It's also funny, too, because, like, I literally got to a point in, I'm referencing these games again because I can't shut up about them. Trails of Cold Steel, there's Lind and Vivi. They're twins that go. They're like twin NPCs that you meet throughout the game. They kind of have a similar relationship because one twin's kind of quote unquote evil, kind of pranking the other. It's a very interesting timing all around because I just like through my replays I've just gotten to that point in the story, so it's just interesting timing in that regard as well. But I'm so fascinated to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. This is wild, dude. We only got a couple episodes left. This was episode 10, so there's only 3 episodes left. So, man, a lot of stuff is coming to an end, like, roughly around the same time. That's kind of, scheduling-wise, is interesting. But regardless, I'm excited to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.